And Then There Were None is a popular, widely known book with an elusive author, Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie was born in 1890 on September 15th. She and her family mainly lived in Devon, which is the setting of her book And Then There Were None. In fact, 15 of her crime novels are set or have ties to Devon County. Agatha Christie was born to a wealthy family, the youngest of 3. Her mother, Clara, was the niece of Christie's grandfather's second wife. Christie's father, Frederick Miller, was a British Army officer, which may have influenced one of our characters, General Mackenzie, originally General MacArthur in the book. He's a retired general of the British Army. Christie was an avid reader from an early age, and even wrote her first story, House of Beauty, at 18 near the 1900s, which later became an early version of her story, The House of Dreams. In 1912, she met her first husband, Colonel Archibald Christie, in the Royal Flying Corps. They married 2 years later, in 1914. In 1926, however, after discovering her husband wanted a divorce and getting into an argument with him, she disappeared. People had feared she'd drowned herself in a nearby lake, Silent Pool. When they found her, on the 4th of December, she had no idea what had happened, not even that she'd disappeared. 2 different doctors diagnosed her with an unquestionable, genuine loss of memory, though it was never known if it was really memory loss, a plot to frame her husband for her murder, or simply a publicity stunt. 2 years later, in 1928, they divorced. The 1920s to 1930s are considered the golden age of detective fiction. Actually, Agatha Christie is credited with being the queen of detective fiction. Christie wrote 75 novels, 66 of them being detective novels. Another one of Agatha Christie's works, Murder on the Orient Express, is one of the best and most famous murder mystery novels in history. Agatha Christie was certainly the standard for crime mystery novels during that time period. In 1932, Hitler became a German citizen, getting a low-level government job from his friend that granted automatic citizenship. Just 2 years later, he was appointed Chancellor of Germany, and in 1939, the year the subject book was published, World War II started. The book And Then There Were None was published on November 6, 1939, by the Collins Crime Club under an original title that I can't say. Later, it was titled 10 Little Indians, and eventually, And Then There Were None. It takes place in the 1930s, which gives it that older feeling and captures the iconic dinner party trope in crime mystery novels. And Then There Were None is a book set in the 1930s in England, a time where society was built structured on social classes. In the book, on the island, in the chaos and panic of the situation where secrets are being revealed and their lives are on the line, they are all worth the same, showing that in death, these social classes they belong to in their society don't matter. They're all the same in the end. The actions that Mr. Justice Wargrave takes against the characters in our play and book is arguably justifiable, as he murders people who have themselves murdered. Only Wargrave's murders are vigilante action, taking the law into his own hands to places where he couldn't reach with his retired career as a judge. However, despite these things, Wargrave himself is not a good person. The only true reason he killed anybody was to satisfy his bloodlust. He only chose our characters because then it would justify the killings to himself, so he wouldn't have to question his morality. Emily Brent, a character in our play and book, is a quote-unquote proper lady. Really, she's just a bitter old traditionalist woman. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a traditionalist, but Brent is constantly dragging down the only other woman in the book because she is unbecoming. Brent, of course, is not the only woman from the 1930s who is a straight-edge traditionalist, but she's the only one in the book. Vera, the other woman, is a much more open-minded woman, even arguing with Lombard about his treatment of the East African native men he'd left to die. Using that as a segue, let's talk more about Lombard. Philip Lombard is an alert, decisive man in the book. However, he is a man who underestimates a woman's conviction, believing from the get-go that the killer in the house couldn't possibly be a woman, which is foreshadowing as well as ironic when his death comes into play, shot by a woman with his own gun. He does not think highly of the native men he left to die in East Africa, a mindset held by many, if not most people, back in the early 1900s, where it was common to have prejudice against other races. The widely suspected inspiration for Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None is a 1930s book called The Invisible Host, written by a husband and wife team by the names of Gwen Bristow and Bruce Manning. The books bear striking resemblances to each other plot-wise. In And Then There Were None, 10 people are invited to an isolated island off the coast of Devon by a mysterious person, then get picked off one by one for their accused crimes of murder. In The Invisible Host, 8 people are invited to a party in a luxurious penthouse, and they find that their host is a killer who's meticulously planned all of their deaths. In both books, the killer communicates to them through a sound system. In Agatha Christie's work, it was a record player, and in Bristow and Manning's work, it was through a radio. By itself, And Then There Were None is an amazing, revolutionary book. However, understanding the life of the author and the possible influences behind the book's writing can greatly enhance the context of the reading experience and the experience of the play itself. It helps us understand the themes of the book, even at their base values, like murder mystery, justice and retribution, and guilt.